We're diving into the dark world of Penumbra as we review Blue Fire, a 3D platforming adventure featuring a creepy but endearing cast of characters. Hey guys, it's Cody with Indie Game Pulse, where we bring you the hottest indie games with the coolest memes. If you want to find out about the newest and best indie games and hear genuine reviews from an indie game fanatic like yourself, click the subscribe button and notification bell to make sure you don't miss another video. Let's get into it. Blue Fire is available now on PC and Nintendo Switch, with Xbox One and PS4 releases to be announced in the near future. The game retails for $19.99, but there is a 10% discount for the opening week. If you decide you're interested in buying, the links are in the description. In Blue Fire, you play as Umbra, the last keeper of the flame, and you're seeking to free the land of Penumbra and its leaders from the corruption which has overpowered them. This corruption can be seen distorting the beautiful landscapes and also in the abundance of evil enemies which now roam the castle grounds. You hear tales of corrupted and imprisoned gods, and one minute you think you need to free and save them, and the next you're being told to let them out and destroy them. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, the story just didn't do it for me. It feels too familiar, a la Hollow Knight and the creeping corruption, but with much less substance. And while the voice acting in the game is minimal, just grunts and groans while you read the on-screen text, it feels like they just took sound bites from the Ori series and pasted them in here. The story feels, in general, like it takes cues from many great games like Ori and Hollow Knight and Legend of Zelda, but without adding anything fresh to the mix. Where the story does excel is in the cute and odd characters you meet along your journey, from the 4 aptly named flautists, to the father and daughter hotel owners, to the leader of the bunny cult. They all have a story to tell, and always something they're looking for too, but they made me chuckle frequently and helped to ease the tension when the game became frustrating. So let's talk about the gameplay a little bit. There's really 2 main areas, the platforming and the combat. Sometimes these are intertwined and sometimes they're completely separate. The platforming is very fun, and there are many areas within the world of Penumbra where you need to accurately platform your way to a new area, and those are oh so rewarding. And then there are specific void areas which offer platforming challenges without the threat of enemies, and when you complete them you get an extra bar for your health meter. I really was getting ready to rip on the platforming from my early game experience, but wow did the difficulty ramp up quickly. I will say that I struggled somewhat unnecessarily on a few void areas because there are spirits and abilities you can find which make you jump higher, dash farther, and even have a second dash and a second jump. These upgrades drastically improved my ability to make it through the harder platforming sections. I do want to show off one of the more difficult void areas just to give you a taste of the difficulty without any of those upgrades, and so you can see just how quickly it can all slip away from you when your palms start getting sweaty. No! And now just a sneak preview of the most difficult void. In contrast to the platforming, I thought the combat in Blue Fire would be where the game stood out, but most of the time I was either bored or frustrated. The level of difficulty is next to none for the first 8 to 10 hours, aside from 1 or 2 enemies that I'll get to in a minute. And the early game bosses, boy, easy peasy lemon squeezy. I would barely consider these mini bosses actually. But then there are standard enemies that I died to over and over because they would not give me 1 second to spawn after being forced off a ledge. And this is where my gripes with Blue Fire start kicking in. Sometimes upon respawning, your camera will be facing any random direction it seems, even if you were locked onto a target before dying. Meaning that you manually need to swing your camera around and try to dodge or shield at the same time because these certain enemies have 0 chill. And sometimes the game will respawn you straight into a hazard, which obviously chips away more from your health. In general, the targeting key often doesn't target the enemy in your sight, the one that you actually want to fight, but seems to target the enemy who is closest to you. The combat itself, not the mechanics, does get much better late in the game when you begin fighting the 3 cursed lords and finally the Queen of Darkness. These are legit bosses that I had to learn and study before finally defeating, and they were fulfilling to fight against, unlike the early game bosses. But it just takes so long to get to the actual bosses and the fun of the game. The pace really should have been shortened or even cut in half, by one major addition. And this major addition, it should be a crime to omit in the modern era, and that is a world map or navigation system. There's no map in your journal, there's not a mini-map, there's no directional arrow pointing you where to go, there's not even a whisper from the wind. And the NPCs that direct you what to do next do exactly that. They say something like, oh yeah, you need to go defeat this guy in the fire keep. See ya. They might show you a 2-second cutscene of the specific door in that area that you need to go through, but all the doors look the same. And you still have to figure out how to get to that area in the first place. It's like if I moved to a new town and my wife said, hey, I ordered pizza for tonight, you need to pick it up. Here's a photo of the pizza place, and then flashed her phone in front of my face, and then she took my phone, my Rand McNally road atlas, and then my car keys because she thought I would enjoy the fresh air and extra time out. Blue Fire has a beautiful world filled with nice things to see, but it's marred by the fact that you have to continually retrace your steps and wander around because you have no idea where to go. There were several times where I just went back to the beginning of the game, where I first spawned, and just started working my way forward until I found the right NPC to talk to and the right door to open. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, for this reason alone, I wouldn't recommend playing Blue Fire. In total, the game took me 18 hours, but I think I spent 8 of those not knowing where I was going or what I was doing. And then there are the bugs. Gotta be kidding. The game crashed a minimum of 20 times during my playthrough, always when I was transporting to a new area. And when the game restarts, and after a normal death in the game too, it takes you back to your last save at a fire shrine. I'll come back to those shrines in a minute because I have a few more bugs to discuss. The first time I fought the final boss, she was unbeatable because she spawned in her third form with a permanent shield. I just had to survive as long as I could and try and figure it out, but there was no figuring it out, so I just had to kill myself and start over. And like I mentioned earlier, when you fall off a ledge during an intense fight, sometimes the game just spawns you into a hazard, thereby stunning you and knocking away your health. And more often than not, on a respawn, you'd be looking in the opposite direction. There's only one guy in here to fight. Why is the game trying to make it harder and screwing the player over? So back to the fire shrines, which are the only way to save your game, and there's only one per world area. Now you might think, that's not too bad, but not only do you have to battle new enemies when you get into the world area and traverse new terrain to find each shrine, but when you get to the shrine, you have to pay to activate it. Meaning, if you don't have enough ore, which is the game's currency, at the time of your arrival, you better hope you don't die before getting it, or you're going back to the last save. It's 2021 and games are still making you pay to access save points? The fire shrines can also be used to cash in collectibles from defeating enemies to increase your mana bar, which in turn helps you shield or do a ranged attack during fights. And you can also equip new spirits here that you've collected or bought, similar to charms in Hollow Knight. There are a total of 18 spirits that you can collect, but I found that probably half of them had to be bought from different vendors in the game. I liked finding the ones hidden throughout the world and trying to solve the puzzle of how to get to them, but then making half of them buyable kind of dampens the fun. And there are a lot of purchasable items in the game, so you better be saving up your ore. As far as the controls go, I did find them to be very responsive in all areas of the game. There is no remapping of the keys, which I think is a little strange, and the camera swing is way too slow on the controller, even at the highest sensitivity. This is especially noticeable in the void areas where you're doing precision platforming, or the boss fights where you're constantly needing to adjust your camera. There are several different types of collectibles that you find throughout the world of Penumbra, like different gems that you collect in chests. These are things like emeralds, sapphires, rubies, void ores, but these all have the same flavor text, and the flavor is bland. Every single one of them says something like a highly valuable and precious rare sapphire/ruby/emerald.
What is this?
Collectibles.
Enjoy. There is no flavor.
It's like someone challenged the writer to fit as many adjectives into one line as they could. Changing these texts up seems like a small touch that would have gone a long way in making the world more dynamic and interesting. Occasionally, you come across something that isn't a gem, and those are a nice surprise. Things like new swords and dead rats. a wide variety of objects that made me laugh on occasion. I will say that overall, I enjoyed the collectibles in the game, especially the different cloaks and swords, and trying different combinations of them to see how they look. Another collectible aspect of the game that I liked was the emote tiles, where if you use the proper emote on a tile, a great chest would spawn on another marked tile in the same area. These usually granted you a kind of special collectible, and I thought that was a nice touch. You can buy new emotes as you travel throughout the game, and this did make revisiting old areas more enjoyable when you could use these emotes and gather some better loot. Now, the art and graphics in Blue Fire are really lovely. I know a lot of people are saying it looks like a mix of Legend of Zelda and Hollow Knight, and it even took me back to the good old days of Spyro. It has a beautiful aesthetic throughout the game, with each world area being distinct and recognizable, and a lot of them have nice effects like falling leaves or snow. The soundtrack too was great, but it doesn't have a super memorable theme. I played for 18 hours and I can't even hum a song in my head from the game. It's not a soundtrack to remember in my opinion, but it is very nice, especially during the boss fights. It definitely elevated my blood pressure a time or two. There are different musical themes for each world area too, which is a nice touch, like the light and airy music that plays in the abandoned path. So the question is, should you play Blue Fire? Not in its current state. The pacing of the game is all wrong, with the first half of the game being far too easy as far as gameplay, but far too frustrating as far as finding your way through the world. The second half of the game sort of makes up for those inconsistencies, but the omission of a world map is game-breaking, in my opinion. I don't want to spend 18 hours playing a game that only has 10 hours of content. The game retails at $19.99, and I would gladly pay that for 10 hours of content. The platforming throughout the game is extremely fun once you have the right upgrades and abilities, and the late game combat is also very fun and exciting, but it simply takes too much work to get to these points. I would suggest waiting for a navigation system to be implemented and for the bugs to be patched before you make your journey into the world of Penumbra. It is a world worth visiting, just give it some time. Thank you so much for watching my review of Blue Fire. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe so you can be notified when I publish my next indie game review, and let me know in the comments what you think of Blue Fire. I'd love to hear from all of you out there. Thank you as well to my 203 subscribers for your continued support. For more indie game reviews and countdowns, check out the videos on your screen now, and I'll see you on the other side.